of about a 2.5-year effort that I think it was back in 21-22 that Verizon, through, maybe not Verizon directly, but one of their subcontractor property owners, this and that, got a lease or a proposed lease down on the corner of Pellet and Lake Road to put a cell tower in. Pellet and Lake Road historically had been a horrible place for cell coverage, and during that time people were telling me, you know that when I'm down there sometimes I'm going to Rome and I'm getting Toronto, and I said, come on, that's an exaggeration to make a point. Well, I went down there to talk to some residents. My phone went into Rome at that time. There was a lot of pushback from the residents about that. I thought it was a lot of pushback. I've talked to the Verizon people who do this every day, and they said, oh, this was nothing compared to chairs being thrown downstate at meetings and whatever. But for my liking, I didn't like the drama. I didn't like the dragged out public hearings. I didn't like any of that. When it got all resolved and the tower was built, and I think that most people are like, it was much to do about nothing because the tower is 250 yards off the road and is really not an eyesore, in my opinion. But when that got done, I reached out to Mike Crosby, right, who was with Verizon. I reached out to Bob Bergdorfer, who was the attorney for Verizon. I said, hey, listen, I don't want to go through that again. Why don't you get together with the town, with Josh Artuso, our Director of Community Development, and myself, and why don't you tell us where we have cell phone coverage issues in town, and let's work together proactively to identify sites that would probably have the least pushback because of not being around, 150 neighbors or whatever. And that started somewhere in late 22, and I gotta say, the first one that was done, and it's not a major tower, but it's what you put on the top of Cherry Ridge, whatever that thing is, Mike, that covered one of the areas, right? Yes. That went through this board, this and that, crickets. Nobody complained. In fact, the Cherry Ridge residents were all cheering for it, right? The next area is Creekside, an area of town that has a shortage, or what do you guys call it? It's either, a gap in coverage. But this was something that we have been working with Verizon on because the site that they're talking about is, for the most part, town-owned. So it's where there is, relative to most things, a limited amount of houses around, and based on tree coverage and this and that, probably a very limited amount of people that will see this thing relative to other places. So that's my preamble. I would have lost that it was 1 minute. But now I'll hand the baton off to the counselor.
Thank you, Supervisor. My name is Laura Smith. I'm with Nixon Peabody. I'm joined today by Kathy Pomponio and Mike Crosby of Verizon, Nico Facey of NBC, and Dave Weisenreiter, I've been practicing your last name, I don't think I got it, of Costage Engineering. And together we make up the Verizon team. As the supervisor correctly pointed out, we always look for gaps in coverage and where coverage needs to be filled. Verizon is a public utility. It's licensed and regulated by the FCC. And when looking at and going through the analysis that the supervisor pointed out, looking for gaps in coverage within Webster, it was identified that this Creekside site has inadequate coverage. I also brought, I know it's posted on the screen, I brought some printouts if the town board is interested in printouts. Otherwise, I will just refer to the materials that are being posted on the screen.
The screen's fine. I think we have the printouts as well.
Oh, great. So as noted on, first we'll go to page 5 of the PDF. Thank you, perfect. As the supervisor noted, in going back to what is the cellular technology. The cellular technology, it's really a honeycomb of a network, and it looks at towers and cells and how towers can be placed to fill those cells. An analogy that is by Bob Bergdorf, my colleague and mentor, is that cells are like a flashlight. And when you shine a flashlight on a desk, As the farther up you get, the brighter it is, or I'm sorry, the wider the scope, but the less bright of the light. The closer it is the more intense of the light, but it doesn't shine as far. When you move the light this way, the light goes that way, and vice versa. If you get too close to another cell, you can have that interference or overlap. And if you get too far away from a place that you're trying to serve, you're not adequately serving that coverage. So again, as the supervisor correctly pointed out, you'll see here there's this inadequate coverage located right where the Webster North cell tower will be located. The green areas are showing good coverage, yellow is less intense coverage, and then orange is where you lose coverage as if you're driving on a rural highway. White is showing a lack of coverage on that low band frequency. So to remedy the coverage, we go through a site selection analysis. Typically that process includes Nico and his team going out and doing a site selection tour of parcels located within a search ring that meet the setback requirements and the land use requirements, and landlords are willing to enter into a lease negotiation with Verizon. Here we are very fortunate. Our first choice is typically to go on municipal property, and that was available here in Webster. So the actual action before the town board is to lease property for Verizon. But we did want to go through this coverage analysis to show you, as the supervisor was noting, this is where we need coverage, this is where we need a facility, and this is ideally located where the town facility the town property is available. I'll also note, if we could go to page 6 of the PDF, that will show, that's a projection of what the coverage will look like once the Webster North cell phone tower is online. So it's going from a lot of white, a lot of lack of coverage, to green full coverage. And again, there's still some areas for Verizon to work on for those coverage gaps, but this really fills a need right in the heart of Webster. If I could ask you now to go to page 1 of the PDF. That's just a quick look at the towers that are already online in that search ring where the parcel would be ideally located to serve the area that we're looking to serve. And last, I'll ask you to go to page 15. Yep, that's it. Which gives a nice demonstration of what the proposed site will look like should the town go forward with leasing land to Verizon. And quickly, I'll note the proposed lease will be for 10,000 square feet. The location is at 1209 Creekside Trail, together with access and utilities from the right-of-way. The lease would be a 5-year lease with up to 4 5-year renewals, and the annual rent would be a continuing payment to the town. With that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
How much are you anticipating, for paying the town for the leasing?
The rent amount is
Yes.
$20,400 in the first year, and then it'll increase by 2% each year.
And if I can jump on that, I want to thank Keith. You were you were the project manager for the town on negotiating that lease. So, thank you. Any other questions for Laura? It's a pause, right? You said you'd pause for questions.
Pause for questions.
Is there more?
The only other note I will make that I had on my checklist I didn't yet share is that the proposed antenna would be 135 feet with a 4-foot lightning rod on top.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, is anybody else from your team going to get up and say anything, or you are? Okay.
We'll let you.
All right.
Hi, Dave Weisner with Costage Engineering. The site does have a few challenges that I thought the board should be aware of as well. We did walk the site with our patron and came up with the cell site location. As you are familiar, or might be familiar, take the existing driveway back. There is like a clear area with a little gravel turnaround, and if you continue beyond that, you get to the pump station. Art did want the open area maintained such that larger construction vehicles can get turned around in that area. So we did take the cell site and push it a little bit further west than where we had originally proposed it, so it is like halfway into the wooded area. On this site, there's also a 100-year floodplain. In this instance, we are approximately 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain with all our compound area, so that's not so bad. We did have a wetlands delineation completed last September. The old DEC wetlands mapping did not have any state wetlands in that area. On the federal wetlands, there are federal wetlands associated with both Mill Creek on the east side of the property and the tributary to Mill Creek on the west side of the property. The wetlands delineation was completed, so there are 3 wetlands that were identified as part of the wetlands delineation. The furthest one is to the far southeast corner of the property. This is all shown on not this plan, but one of the plans in the set. The second wetland is about 65 feet south of the compound, and the third wetland is to the west by about 95 feet. With the new New York State DEC guidelines, a portion of the compound area is within the New York State DEC 100-foot buffer, so there will be wetlands permitting associated with this particular project, so that will require us some time to get that permitted. I can answer any site plan related questions that you might have.
What's the status of the jurisdictional determination with the DEC?
We did get that back. It was a positive jurisdiction. I can Let's see if I got the letter on there. It just came in here in the last 2 weeks.
I don't, it's not so much a question, but I know, Pat, you've been out on this site many times, and so has Art. From a town assessment of if this is the appropriate where and all that. Art's not here tonight. I know he's been out there a lot. This has been going on for about 18 months, is it not? Which I will say is kind of, measure twice, cut once. I think the homework was all done on both sides, and that leads us to tonight, and then the public hearing tonight. So.
I do have coworkers that live in the area. They are screaming for this tower because they do not have good cell coverage, so that's a fact.
Well, the map was pretty astonishing how much range and gap will be filled with this, and sadly, there's no needed.
Dave, for full disclosure, I live in the area.
There you go.
Do not put it
How's
up.
your cell coverage?
What's it?
No, it's it's a tough area.
Can I just say something?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind, because when we're on tape and whatever, they'll never hear you, Kathy, and they'll never see it.
Hi, I'm Kathy Pomponio. I am a project manager with Verizon Wireless, and I just wanted to say on the wetland topic that yes, we did get the positive jurisdictional determination just a few days ago, but we did expect that. We were prepared for that, and I do want to say that we just did a site in Penfield called Penfield Highway where we applied for a buffer permit with the DEC and it was granted. So, we had to go through a process with the DEC, answer some questions, which we did, and they granted us the buffer permit. So we expect the same process to take place in this situation as well.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay,
Thank you.
And I don't, well, I'll aim this at Kyle, but Laura, you might have some insights on this since you guys do this from a legal standpoint. Big difference between this and the one I referenced before, Pellet and Lake, is that was a private owner that you had negotiated a lease with. I don't know if that was the reason why it had to go through planning board and all of that through public hearings and also the town board. But the way I'm understanding it is this process will, because it's our land, town will not have to go in front of the planning board. Is that correct?
You want me to answer it, or would you like to take this question?
I'll let you have the
Okay,
first
so,
stab.
the ownership of the land doesn't change the process per se, right? Our code requires it to go through the planning board. However, there is case law that would enable the town, if they decided as such, that they could declare themselves exempt from the zoning requirements for this particular land. There's certain criteria that has to be met under the case law, but that is an option that's available. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that, Laura.
Yeah, I will add that, in the first instance, Verizon always looks for co-location on a tower, right? So I want to set that as our first standard is always to co-locate on a tower for a multitude of reasons. One being, it's easier, right? It's easier for the town, it's easier for the applicant. The next location that Verizon looks for is municipal property. It's a way for entering into a partnership with the municipality, ensuring that the municipality is receiving rent from the lease. So we do try to target municipally owned property, and then we'll look to higher densities, commercial use, industrial use, such as that. I will note that because it is property owned by Webster, there is a court case, it's from the 1980s, it's actually the city of Rochester against Monroe County regarding a zoning dispute at the airport. And through that, the Court of Appeals has set forth a balancing test for when both either a municipality is developing land that it owns within another land use jurisdiction, or when a town is also developing land that it owns within its own municipality. And the balancing test is the same, which I find interesting as a municipal attorney, that you have to go through the same analysis if it's, Penfield owns a parcel within Webster, you would go through that same analysis if it was Penfield or Webster town-owned property. So one of the items that will be before the town board for your consideration is a determination of whether this parcel and this use meets that balancing test that was set forth in County of Monroe versus City of Rochester. I think it's City of Rochester versus County of Monroe. So that will be one of the actions before the town board for the town board's consideration of, does this project and its use, which will be, providing cell phone coverage for the public use, it will be expanding emergency life and safety ability for individuals to use cell phones. That's the type of analysis the town board will have to go through when doing a Monroe balancing test, same as going through seeker, and then also determining whether or not to lease the land to Verizon.
Yeah, excellent summary by both of you, and I what is it in court? You're not supposed to ask a question you don't know the answer to, and I probably shouldn't have put you both on the spot like that, but you did great. It's interesting because, in about 20 minutes when we start a public hearing on this, and that's really the first formal town board action on this is to have the public hearing. And everything you just said, Laura, I guess is factual. The reality is, if 150 people come in here and take that podium and scream bloody murder against it, it will probably slow up the process, and we have to look at this a little bit closer. On the other end of the spectrum, if nobody comes in, I know this, we're not doing any resolutions tonight, because really I would have to, as supervisor, step back from that public hearing, and if nobody came here to say anything against it, now I got to turn around to Kyle and hopefully also collaborating with you and say, well, what now is the proper sequence of resolution or resolution, seeker, that balancing of this and that? Can we say, we can keep this encompassed within the town board decision and we don't have to go off to the planning board or zoning board if there's a height variance at 135 feet and all that? I'm not ready to have that conversation today. I figured we'll compartmentalize this. We figured we'd give you the presentation, so and obviously at the public hearing you get a chance to say something too. If nobody shows up, I don't know if you have to say anything else at the public hearing. You just had 20 minutes to present and give that, and also have questions if the board still has questions on this.
just had a question about the height. Is there gonna be a height variance required, Josh?
Yes, if, depending on which direction the board takes. But under the traditional rules, it is a little bit higher than what's permitted.
It's 120, is that the
And-
height that's permitted?
I believe it's either 100 or 120, I can't recall.
Can I ask you, Josh, the traditional rules, but are you saying that the precedent of court cases show that the town board can step into the role of granting that height variance?
You wouldn't be granting a variance, you'd be declaring that the town of Webster is exempt from those zoning requirements.
Okay.